It's now 10 o'clock. Council members, Councilmember Labange, Gruel, Weezer are here. We have 4 members. Again, Mr. Cardenas and Mr. Padilla are excused, and Ms. Perry is excused to arrive at 11 o'clock. So we will need another 6 council members to begin the meeting. I'd like to ask Councilmember Hahn, Councilmember Padilla, Councilmember Hahn, Councilmember Parks, Councilmember Reyes, Councilmember Rosendahl, Councilmember Smith, Councilmember Weiss, Councilmember West, and Councilmember Zine to please join us as soon as possible. We will go live on TV. Welcome, Mr. Weiss. One last note to our friends from EAA, we also have scheduled this is going to be on the council agenda for next week too, so we have actually formalized a piece to be briefed on our ongoing negotiations with the EAA next week, and we of course welcome folks to come then as well. So we always welcome you as any members of the public to be here today too. Thank you. Welcome to Los Angeles City Council. Today is Wednesday, June 21st, 2006. We are in room 340, the John Ferraro Council Chambers, in the 3rd floor of City Hall. We meet here every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m., except for the first Friday of the month, in which we now meet out in Van Nuys City Hall and have a regular scheduled meeting there at 10 a.m. We invite all members of the public to come here for general public comment or to watch the proceedings of the City Council. It's an open meeting, and you can also testify here on items that have been agendized for public comment or for general public comment, either here in person or via remote from our Van Nuys City Hall, where we do have the capability of listening to you from there. We also are webcast on our city's homepage at lacity.org. The proceedings of the meeting can be watched on your computer or, of course, as many of you are doing right now on Channel 35, LA City View, where both a live broadcast as well as a rebroadcast in the evening are shown. We also are available via telephone through Council Phone at 213-621-CITY. And you can listen to the proceedings not just of the City Council, but also of our council committees. We are awaiting 10 members, which is 2/3 of our body, constituting a quorum in which we can begin official business. And I want to thank council members who are here in a timely fashion. Councilmember Gruel, Councilmember Weezer, Councilmember Labange, Councilmember Reyes, Councilmember Rosendahl, Councilmember Wesson, and Councilmember Zine are all here. Councilmember Cardenas is excused this meeting, as is Councilmember Padilla, and Councilmember Perry is excused to arrive at 11 a.m. That would leave Councilmember Hahn, if you can please join us, Councilmember Parks, if you would join us as well, Councilmember Smith, and Councilmember Weiss. We are waiting 2 more members. As soon as we have those 2 members, we will begin this meeting. Thank you. again to council members Gruhl, Weezer, Labange, Reyes, Rosendahl, Smith, Wesson, and Zine for being here. We are awaiting Ms. Hahn, Mr. Parks, or Mr. Weiss. When any of the three of them arrives, we will have a quorum and we'll begin the meeting. Please, you can make your way down, Ms. Hahn, Mr. Parks, and Mr. Weiss. Thank you. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Cardenas, Gruhl, Hahn, Weezer, Labange, Padilla, Parks, Perry, Reyes, Rosendahl, Smith, Weiss, Wesson, Zine, Garcetti. 10 members present and a quorum, Mr. President.
All right, first order of business, please.
Approval of the minutes.
Mr. Smith moves, Mr. Weiss seconds. If there's no objection, those minutes will be unanimously approved. Next order of business.
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
Ms. Perry moves and Mr. Wesson seconds. If there is no objection, those two will be unanimously approved. Next order of business.
Mr. President, this is the time for comments from the public on items not on council's agenda.
Okay. I'd like to turn first to Mr. Michael Hunt, and be followed by Matt Dowd. 2 minutes apiece.
Well, good morning, City Council. You guys got another problem on your hand, huh? These guys haven't had a raise in 2.5 years. But while you guys take $110,000 and don't give nothing to the working class, what's up with that? I think they all deserve a 25% raise immediately. Man, it sure is cold. Ms. Gruhl, big ups on your $240,000. I'm watching you. Bill, we got problems. They arrested Abraham. Yes, they did. Like they said, hey, they nailed my ass. You know, he got nails in his ass now. I, too, would not like to have nails in my ass. You know, go back to work, equal pay, equal work, jobs. You understand? Not getting arrested. Grassroots are really upset because we all took a vote that we need to see you. You're not doing nothing in the community.
Mr. Hunt, if you'll direct your comments towards me, please.
Okay, well, Eric Garcetti, let's see. We got the city attorney changing the ordinance in the middle of the trial. What do you call that? The Nigger Act. What do we do? What do we do? You
I
got
respectfully ask you to please use as civil language as you can. Appreciate
civil,
the ideas.
Civil, it's in the dictionary. We went over that.
I'm asking you respectfully, please.
Why are you mistreating everybody that you work with, even your own people? They need raises. Bill, you need to stop arresting your people for working. You are arresting your people for working. This guy got a big Bill Rosenthal sign, and he's in jail.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. Appreciate your testimony today. Mr. Dowd? Going once, going twice. If Matthew Dowd's not here, we'll turn next to Mort Allen in Van Nuys.
Good morning. As most of you know, since Eric and Wendy took over the Janice and Jack show, it's been the highest rated show here in the Valley, and everybody watches it, and we have a problem. The problem is that public comment is one-sided, and everybody seems to want to know what's really the truth behind the farm situation, because people are getting pretty upset at watching it. So what I kind of wanted to do is get the other side of the story here, because what we have is 350 farmers that want to become millionaires with the land. And first of all, without naming names of properties, the gentlemen that own this property are one of the finest people in LA. They own a lot of Hollywood, a lot of downtown. They've been in business 40 years. They rehab buildings that nobody wants. And it's really unfair the way they're being characterized, especially with some religious slurs. Let's take the facts. We have 14 acres of prime land. That's 610,000 square feet. Divided by 350 farmers, you have 350 plots of 17,400 square feet each. Divide this by the $14 million price, and the public is donating $498,000 worth of land to each of these 350 farmers. Let's go a step further. The taxpayer spent in excess of $1.5 billion a few years ago to build the Alameda Corridor to ease the movement of goods from the Port of LA to Long Beach, which goes from the ports to warehouses in other cities, many in Orange County, are repackaged and trucked to LAX for air shipment to their destinations. The idea of the Alameda Corridor was to have major warehouses along the corridor to repackage and go directly to LAX. This land was intended to be approved with 500,000 square feet of new state-of-the-art green warehouses, not to make 350 farmers instant millionaires. I think I've said enough. Now I want to just touch on one other thing, the issue at hand, homeless middle class. I don't know how many of you realize that there are thousands of middle-class residents that are losing their homes due to the crazy demolitions and condo conversions that have hit LA like a plague.
If I can ask you.
Are you aware of how many people are living in parks and illegal trailers in areas like Brentwood and Sherman Oaks?
Thank you, Mr.
Displaced
Allen.
because of
That's-
rent control forced long-time
2 minutes.
owners to sell.
If I can ask you to conclude.
Okay, real quick. If you act fast, you have a chance to put LA on the map as the first city to totally overcome the homeless property. How many of you are aware that
I'm sorry, Mr. Allen, I'm going to have to cut you
the
off there.
Sears building is back on?
We've reached our 2 minutes, but we do appreciate you giving your public comment today. We have one more speaker card. I'd like to ask Michael Davies and Bob Aquino to come forward, please. You have 2 minutes to address the public, please. Go ahead. I'll just remind folks, the clock is ticking, so if you could please let our speakers be heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Robert Aquino, Engineers and Architects Association, Los Angeles. As we stand here before you, we're approaching the 2-year mark that EAA members have been without renewed MOUs. You've already let us know that you don't value EAA members' service to the city as much as you do DWP employees. The real question before you right now is, how do you value EAA employees' service to this city? On Thursday last week, I hand-delivered a letter to the mayor of this city based on the fact that we're approaching 2 years and couldn't get any action out of any of the bodies here to give us your last, final, and best offer. I have been told by one of the CAO's minions that that last, best, and final offer will be discussed at next week's EERC and that it will be forthcoming to EAA. What we're interested now is to find out how much or how little you think of our members, and it will tell us in the form of that offer. It's a little bit sad to us that we've been hearing things like, the reason the council hasn't acted is because we're not going to take the blame for the mayor on this issue and other political comments. First of all, my members are sophisticated enough to understand how this city government works. They know that the power stops at this horseshoe. We also know that we've been treated unfairly, and even the mayor admits that, on this negotiations as well as previous negotiations. What we're here to comment about is that you now will influence the offer that's given to us. My members will vote on that offer to tell you what they think of your offer. But I would ask you to please make no mistake about this. EAA members and this organization have contributed in the form of money and votes to most of your candidacies. We're going to know that you are the ones that supported us and gave us a good offer when we get that good offer after next week. But we do understand
Mr. Aquino,
how this government works.
if I can ask you to conclude, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Appreciate that. And if I can, lastly, if I can have everybody's attention for a moment, I'd like to ask everybody's participation from the audience, please. We do have some members of the public who are unable to come in, so we appreciate being able to clear the rows a little bit to allow some other members of the public to join us. Thank you very much, colleagues. This closes our public comment. Colleagues, we may have some members of the public who were unable to come in, and so we may reopen public comment, but otherwise, let us run through the agenda. Madam Clerk, first order of business.
First item on the agenda, Mr. President, item number 62, there was a request to continue that matter to July 5th.
Okay. Let's go ahead and wait one moment on that, make sure that everybody can hear. There's been, I'm sorry, which item number is to continue?
It should have been scheduled for the first meeting after July 1st, so
Okay, hold on one moment.
that would be
If I
appropriate
can
to
please ask
continue it.
everybody to, if I can please ask everybody to keep it down as you exit. Obviously, you've asked us to listen to you, and we would now ask you to please allow us to listen to what's happening as well here in council chambers. Thank you. Which item, Madam Clerk, was?
Mr. President, that was item number 62, and it should have been scheduled for the first meeting after July 1st, and it was inadvertently scheduled, and it's appropriate to continue the matter.
If there's no objection, colleagues, to continuing item 62 to that date, we will go ahead and do that. Next items, please.
Next items are items noticed for public hearings, items 1 and 2, and I believe there is a card on item number 1.
Let's call number 1 special for a card from the public. Anybody wishing to call number 2 special? If not, let's open the roll on 2, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
That is approved. Next batch of items, please.
Next items 3 through 29 are items for which public hearings have been held. Items 3 and 4 are confirmations of commissioners. Do you wish to hold those on the desk?
Yes, please. Let's hold the commissioners on the desk.
And then that would leave before council items 5 through 29, and I believe there is a technical amendment on item number 6 that is, will be distributed shortly, and on item number 29, there are 2 reports on the file.
Okay, Mr. Parks, would you like to move on item 29?
Yes, 29, Budget and Finance Report.
Okay. Mr. Parks moves the budget and finance report on that. If there's no objection when we vote on these items, that will be what we move. Any other specials, colleagues? This is 3 through 29. We've held 3 and 4. Sorry? 20. We'll hold 20 on the desk for Mr. Labange. Any other special items?
And, Mr. President, did you wish to call number 6 special to wait for the technical
Yes, let's wait till
amendment?
we have the amendment on that one. Seeing no other specials, let's open the balance on the roll. The roll on the balance. Close the roll and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Those are approved. Next items, please.
Next items are
I'm
items...
sorry, let's send 27 forthwith, please. There's no objection. Next items.
Number 11, forthwith.
And number 11 forthwith, if there's no objection as well.
Next items are items for which public hearings have not been held. Items 30 through 66, 10 votes are required for consideration.
Okay, colleagues, specials, they're in 30 through 66.
And item number 30 is a confirmation. Do you wish to hold
Okay,
that on the desk?
let's hold 30 on the desk for Commissioner confirmation. Other specials? Is Ms. 27?
30.
37 for Mr. Parks. Other specials, colleagues? Seeing none on the balance, let's prepare the roll and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Okay. Those are approved. Next items, please.
Next items, Mr. President, 67 through 70 are closed sessions. Do you wish to hold those on the desk?
Yes, please. Let's hold those on the desk.
Then that would take council, next item is item number 71, and that is on the continued agenda. It's an item for which public hearing has not been held.
Okay. Anybody wishing to be heard on item number 71? If not, we'll open and close the public hearing on that. Anybody wishing to call 71 special from the council? If not, yes, you'd like to call it special? Oh, yes, this is the, okay, we will hold that on the desk. Sure. Ms. Perry. Do you want to continue it now, Ms. Perry, or did you want to hold that on the desk? We'll hold that on the desk then. Did you want to continue that, Ms. Perry, or did you want to hold that on the desk? Okay, we will hold that on the desk. All right, any other items?
No, Mr. President, that would take council back. Do you wish to take the commissioners first?
Yes, let's do the commissioners first.
First item would be item number 3, and that's confirmation of Ms. Raymond Matheda to the Housing Authority.
All right. Raymond, come on forward. If you'll sit here at the desk, nice to see you. And I'd like to recognize Mr. Wesson, our Chair of the Housing Community Economic Development Committee, on your nomination to the HACLA Board. Mr. Wesson?
Yes, Mr. President and members, I just recently had the opportunity to have you before the committee that I'm fortunate to chair. And again, as I told you before, I was impressed. And what I would like to have happen at this point in time, Mr. President, if she could just tell you a little bit about herself and some of her ideas. I wholeheartedly support this.
Thank you. Any other members wishing to be heard? Maybe would you like to say anything about your interest or your service in this?
Sure. You know, as I told Chairman Wesson in the Housing and Community Economic Development Subcommittee, I'm very excited to join the board of HACLA. I'm an Indian. I was originally an Indian citizen that moved to America about 15 years ago, and truly a believer in the economic opportunity and the system that we have of government and of economic development in America. And I think one of the most important things that society as a whole has to address as part of what I believe the best system of capitalism in the world is the need for housing, is the basic rights for housing, food. As they say in India, roti, kapda or makan, food, clothing and housing, the basic rights of every citizen of America and the greatest country in the world. And I'm happy to and really excited to contribute to that, to ensuring that for the citizens of LA.
Thank you very much. We look forward to your service. If nobody else wishes to be heard, we will now vote on the nomination. Please prepare the roll and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Congratulations, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Please give her a round of applause. Next commission appointment, please.
Next is item number 4, and that's confirmation to the Industrial Development Authority.
Okay. Thank you. Hold on one moment. Mr. Wesson, we have our proposed commissioner for the Industrial Development Authority as well, if you'd like to say a word or two.
Again, thank you, Mr. President and members. Again, this young man will be a fine addition to the commission, and I am just standing not to ask him one question at all, but to ask the members sitting around this horseshoe to support this unanimously.
Anybody else wishing to be heard from the council? If not, Mr. Duto, would you like to add anything about your interest in your service as well on the Industrial Development Authority?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Sure.
I want to do my part to keep LA a thriving world-class city. There are many ways to do it, and specifically the IDA has a particular mission, that is to bring high-class businesses to the area, retain high-class businesses in the area, and with that, bring jobs for our residents. By trade, by profession, I'm a lawyer, and I started out my career at the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, where I worked in the Enforcement Division in Washington, D.C. Since then, I have worked over at the Buckhalter Law Firm here locally, and currently I am tax counsel for the Honorable John Chung at the State Board of Equalization. If I have the honor of serving on the IDA, I would place a high priority on not just bringing jobs and businesses to the area, but seeing how we can have more mixed-use projects so that we can not only have businesses that come to our great city, but also have room for more residents in the key parts and key business corridors of the area. I'm really honored to be here today, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you very much. And the Industrial Development Authority has been doing some wonderful work in the past few years in getting that mechanism of economic development out there, so we appreciate your willingness to join it. If there's nobody else who wishes to be heard on the council, why don't we prepare the roll on the nomination and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So we'll send that forthwith to the mayor, please. And next item, please.
Next item is item number 30, and that's confirmation to the Board of Taxi Cab Commissioners.
Okay. So our next one.
And that's
Ms.
Mr. Siderman.
Oh, Mr. Reyes.
Yes, Council President, I'd like to 14, 16 forthwith, please.
14 and 16?
Forthwith.
Okay. There's no objection, we'll send both of those forthwith. And I'd like to recognize our Chair of the Transportation Committee. I'd like to say a few words. Well, why don't we start out? Please tell us about your interest in being on the board, and we appreciate you putting yourself forward for this nomination.
Good morning, council members. Thank you for having me here. I've been serving on the commission for the last few months, and it's been an honor and something that's very worthwhile. The taxi industry has gotten a lot of press in the last couple of weeks, not all of it positive, and it's an honor to be working on a commission with people on it that are working so hard to improve the image of LA's taxi industry. So look forward to continuing working with all the other members on that commission.
We have a number of council members that'd like to speak. I'd like to ask our Chair of Transportation Committee to start, Ms. Gruhl, and then Mr. Labange and Mr. Zine also are on the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Garcetti. Thank you, Commissioner. We had a chance to talk a little bit on whatever day that was, Thursday of last week, and thank you for your commitment in serving on this commission, and particularly at a time when there's a lot of discussion about our taxi cabs, and as we talked about the other day, the fact that, you know, a majority of our taxi cab, or probably a super majority of our taxi cab drivers are following the law and doing what they're supposed to, but there are those unscrupulous ones that we are trying to focus on, and to also go after those individual companies that are putting zappers on our taxi cabs, and I think really taking away the public trust, and we need to help rebuild that. And so I'm looking forward to the Commission's leadership, because the responsibility is with you, and I think that the Commission has demonstrated their interest in hearing about all the potential issues, and also ways in which we can support our taxi cab drivers, because we know many of them work 24/7 sometimes, and are working many, many hours in serving our community. And so, colleagues, we talked about some options that they can look at, expanding some of our enforcement capabilities, addressing the issue of bandit taxi cabs, as well as ensuring that we provide some resources within the taxi cabs that lets people know what the prices are, what the average cost would be to go to a certain location. So I don't know, I was there for only part of it, kind of what the next steps are that the Taxi Cab Commission is going to take on some of these issues. Would you have a moment to share with us?
Sure. The commission is the commission's looking at some particular options, including the ones that you had brought up at the meeting, the GPS systems, the receipts that would be automatically printed out for all rides. There are some cab companies that already do that, but it really only works if everybody is on the same page. And so there are a number of the proposals, particularly the ones that you mentioned, that we're following through on, which I think other cities have implemented very effectively, and I think we can do the same.
Great, and thank you, and I know a number of the taxi cab drivers were there that day to testify as well. One other issue that I want to, as we get through some of these challenges, is look at, I was in the city of Chicago, and in the back of all their taxi cabs, they have a touch screen in the back that tells about the city, what's happening that day. Again, I know it's probably more privately funded because there were lots of advertising on it, but tells about some of the cultural tourism opportunities, and hotels, those types of things that sometimes when people arrive and they have a long taxi cab ride, it'd be great for them to learn about where they can go in the city of Los Angeles. Again, as we get through some of these other hurdles, I look forward to talking to you about that and being able to have that similarly in our taxi cabs.
Absolutely. I think that's an idea that's also in the works. I don't know if the bids have gone out for that, but it's something that we're very much interested in pursuing, because it only adds to the positive image of not only the industry of having more advanced cabs with better features, but also adds to the city.
Great.
So it's something we're behind.
Thank you, Sergio. I appreciate, again, your commitment. It's sometimes a big-time commitment, those hearings and meetings, but thank you for your leadership, and look forward to working with you.
Thank you very much, Councilor.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I'd like to recognize Mr. Zine next, to be followed by Mr. Labange.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. Good morning.
Good morning.
My concern is the bandit taxi cab and what we're doing to help the legitimate taxi industry. I've been out with the taxi authority, inspectors, investigators who have limited authority to do their job. And there's supposed to be some agreement between the Los Angeles Police Department and the taxi industry to do some more enforcement to rid this city of the bandit taxi cabs, which are ripping off the public and also hurting our legitimate taxi industry. What is the commission doing in that regard?
The commission's been pretty active with respect to the bandit cabs, in particular what Councilperson Gruhl brought up, which is the zappers, these devices that move the meter, they accelerate the meter so that it looks like you're legitimately getting your fare tabulated by the computer when in fact it's being accelerated and you're paying a couple pennies more for every couple minutes, every couple of miles. And the commission's enforcement arm and the staff have been working quite diligently to rid the industry of these bandit cabs. What was interesting was in a recent crackdown which took place at the airport and got quite a bit of press, there was, they detained a number of cabs, I think it was close to 400 cabs were inspected, and of those, while they wrote approximately 50 citations, only 2 of the cabs were found to have these zapper devices, or allegedly have the zapper devices. So
those are the legitimate cabs that you're referring to at the airport?
Yes.
Not the bandit cabs?
Right. With respect to the bandit cabs that have no license, that shouldn't be operating, the enforcement arm of the commission for the time that I've been there has been very active, and it's a topic in virtually every meeting that we have to pursue the bandit cabs. It's certainly a priority for the commission as it represents a grave danger to the public to have the bandit cabs out there, uninsured, unlicensed, and to the extent that there are bandit cabs out there and that are operating, every opportunity that every time it comes up or that it's reported to the commission, it's pursued.
The concern I have is that your investigators don't have enough authority, there's not enough personnel, and this cooperative agreement between the police department and the taxi operation is not working, and they were going to assess themselves an extra fee to pay for that additional enforcement. That I haven't seen come around.
Right. Well, the additional fees is a sensitive issue with the commission. Adding even the fees for the additional cost of gas has been, a very sensitive issue, and we're pursuing that. Additional enforcement, we've seen good cooperation with the police department. For example, in the last event that took place at the airport, there was a lot of police cooperation there. When it comes to the bandit cabs, I think you're absolutely right. There needs to be more cooperation, stronger enforcement, and if it means that there needs to be an additional fee, that's definitely something that the commission, I would support considering and passing if we can get there.
Well, I've been out there with them on enforcement, and being a reserve police officer, I can work in that capacity, and it's very frustrating to the investigators, the inspectors that you have. They don't have the resources to do the job. The police department isn't doing all they can to coordinate with them, in addition to the industry trying to put in money to help bring in officers on overtime. So I would encourage you to look into that, because I see the bandit taxi cabs all over the city ripping off the people who think it's a legitimate cab, again, hurting our legitimate industry. And I go to other cities where there are virtually no bandit cabs because there's been an aggressive enforcement effort. And our enforcement effort here is very limited and very weak because we don't have the resources, but we can get those resources in a cooperative effort, and the money is there from the industry to make it happen. So I would encourage you on your reappointment to the commission to really give that some sensitivity and some strength, because without that, we're going to find more bandits taken over and more legitimate taxi cab companies going away. and then we're not going to get our revenues from them, the public's going to get ripped off, and no one's going to win. So I just encourage you to follow up on that as much as you can.
I assure you that we will, Councilperson, and I think our next meeting is scheduled for early July, and I invite you to come to any of the meetings that we have to speak on the issue.
I will do that.
Even if you're not able to attend the next meeting, I assure you that I'll bring it up.
Thank you. I will make an appointment to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Labange is next. Ms. Gruhl wanted to say something just on that piece. With Mr. Labange, is that all right with indulgence? Just a quick comment?
Just Mr. Zine, just so you know, on the bandit taxi cabs, what has occurred in committee, we supported overtime for LAPD officers to assist the department, because there's only 6 inspectors.
Right.
And a taxi cab driver who's a bandit taxi knows, oh, there's so-and-so, he's coming, so they can't catch them.
Right.
We are in there's an issue with the city attorney's office, which they had told us a month ago everything was fine. I called their office this week and said, we've been waiting. And so hopefully they will kick it out of the city attorney's office and it'll come to council, which would give LAPD overtime specifically to help, because LAPD could do I think, provide some assistance.
Well, there was supposed to be, if I could just, because I've been following up on this closely since I went out and worked with them. The inspectors came to me and said, can you please help us, because they're so frustrated with my law enforcement background. They're willing to assess themselves to pay for that overtime, but there's some effort that is blocking that cooperation.
Why don't we
between the police
flag that
department.
for further discussion, colleagues?
Anyway, I hope we'll get it resolved.
Mr. Labange.
Thank you.
May I ask the Chair of Committee a quick question before we ask the Commission designee? Madam Chair, the issue of bandit cabs that you and Mr. Zine just spoke of, the issue of taking the Hollywood prostitution abatement, take the cars, have you ever thought of doing that from bandit cabs, of taking them?
We have, and part of it, probably less on the bandit cabs, but more on when recently when they use the zappers and they take away the money again from a particular individual, when they're charging them more than they are supposed to. We are trying to hike up the enforcement aspect of that, and we can look at that as well.
Look at that and see what works. But anyway, back to our designee. Thank you for your service to the city. When's the last time you've been in a cab?
Last week.
How was it?
It was all right.
Do you ever do a test, and ask them about all the hot spots in town?
Every time I'm in a cab, I start a conversation with the driver about the driving conditions, the relationship with the franchise.
Right. Do we need to help our cab drivers learn more about Los Angeles and the great things about the city? Do we have any program in our taxi division that teaches them about, let's say, various spots in this city for people who visit, et cetera?
I think you're hitting on an important item. They are, representatives of the city to a large extent to many of the visitors that come to Los Angeles, and I think that that's a worthwhile idea. I don't think that we have anything in place to help them become better educated about parts of the city, and this is actually first I've heard of an idea to train them.
Great. Well, here's what we'll do. We'll do it together. And your commission, and I see the mayor's deputy right there. I'd like to do it with the mayor. As we have soft openings at the observatory this fall, one morning I'd like to invite all the taxi drivers, and we'll get coffee and fruit and sweet rolls, and invite them so they could see it, so they could talk about it, and maybe get a pamphlet from LA Inc. that says, these are the important parts of Los Angeles: Miracle Miles, Museum Row, Exposition Park, and the great Natural History Museum, California Science Center, African American Museum, downtown Little Tokyo, Japanese American National Museum, Watts Towers, etc., on down the line. Are you with me on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Madam Clerk, make sure that we get that together. I support this great nominee. Maritime Museum, San Pedro, St. Vincent Thomas Bridge. Thank you, Bobby De Niro. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Labange. We now have Mr. Rosendahl, Ms. Hahn, and then Ms. Gruhl for a second time. Mr. Rosendahl. Mr. Rosendahl? If Mr. Zine and Mr. Reyes could get Mr. Rosendahl through there. Mr. Rosendahl.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate that very much. Good morning.
Good morning, Councilman.
One of the issues before the Committee of Transportation has to do, obviously, with the price of gas going up. The taxi cab drivers don't want to say, hey, how about giving me 50 cents or something, or a buck. They'd like to have it as a surcharge that when they flip down the flag, that additional dollar is automatic. And then, as a formula could be developed that suggests if the price goes down on gas, then that dollar would go down. What's your thoughts on that?
There's a system in place now with certain thresholds that the surcharge does go into effect, and I believe that the 50-cent surcharge is already in effect. And with gas prices recently, I think that we are getting close to or have passed the dollar surcharge portion of it, which is something that we will be addressing, I believe, in the next commission meeting, which that would be just a flat dollar charge for all rides, respective of the length of the ride. Something else that is a worthwhile topic of consideration is also the rate, affecting the rate with respect to the gas prices, because in my opinion, a dollar surcharge on a 5-minute, 1-mile ride and a $1 surcharge for a 50-mile ride is a little bit disproportionate.
That's great. Okay, that was my main question. The other issues my colleagues have talked about rather clearly, but I'm looking forward to the Commission acting on an automatic dollar increase, if that's what the formula suggests, with the price of gas being what it is. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope we can meet that at the next meeting.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl. Ms. Han is our next speaker, followed by Ms. Gruhl. Ms. Han?
Thank you, and good morning, and thanks for agreeing to serve on this commission. Since I've become chair of Commerce, Trade, and Tourism, I've had a lot of interaction with our taxi cab drivers at LAX, and trying to understand the whole ATS system that we have out there. And I was just going to say that I'm hopeful that you and your fellow commissioners are paying attention to some of the issues that have been raised by the taxi cab drivers. I didn't know if you have personally ever gone out to the holding lot out there at LAX and made a tour of it to see what maybe some of their issues and concerns are. As you know, I have been working on some amendments to the ATS contract, which deals with some of their concerns, particularly the appeal process that taxi cab drivers have when they're given a citation by ATS. I thought maybe you could comment on some of those issues.
Sure. The ATS has been a hot topic since I joined the commission a few months ago, and it comes up in almost every conversation that I start when I get back into town with a cab driver at LAX. There's a lot of frustration with conditions at ATS. The cab drivers have very reasonable requests, I think, in many circumstances, and it's something that the commission, for the short time that I've been on there, takes very seriously and wants to address. I think in the next few meetings, because of the recent crackdown that took place at the holding lot, I think that it'll continue to be one of the top agenda items that we address. And as for visiting the ATS, the holding lot, I'm going on Friday, June 23rd.
Oh, you shouldn't have announced that. It's more fun to make surprise visits.
Well, maybe I'll show up a day early.
Well, I appreciate that, and certainly, you know, our taxi cab drivers, particularly at LAX, are really the face of hospitality for the millions of tourists that come in and out of Los Angeles, and certainly we want them to present a great appearance. We certainly want them to be fair and honest. We're not going to tolerate any kind of cheating or meter tampering. You know, if that crackdown resulted in kind of finding a few bad apples, and certainly we're all for that. I just know that in my discussions with taxi cab drivers, I thought they had some legitimate, reasonable concerns, and I'm trying to work with them, and I hope our commission as well. Hopefully, at the end of the day, we can have happy taxi cab drivers and drivers who will serve the traveling public that comes in Los Angeles in a dignified and respectful way.
I think you're absolutely right, Councilperson. I think that the image of the cab drivers is something of utmost importance. The desires on the part of the cab drivers to increase rates, to add the dollar surcharge, all of those things I think happen a lot more easily when the public is behind the cab drivers and appreciate their image, and just makes things easier for everybody, and it makes things better for the city when their image is something that is far better. And it's unfortunate that a few bad apples tarnish the image of so many really good cab drivers. I think that it's absolutely correct that the supermajority of the cab drivers are very hardworking people with families. They're, trying to make a living. It's not easy. It's a tough job. It's often a dangerous job. And with the amount of work that they put into this job, I think that their image needs to improve a little bit to better reflect the vast majority of the drivers.
So if we can improve some of those conditions at the holding lot, I think that would go a long way. And I know there's still some discussions between LAX and ATS, but there's a lot of serious issues. But I will tell you, on an insignificant issue, but it means a lot to them, I'm going to go on record saying that I support them having their own bulletin board at the LAX holding facility. I think that's a small thing that we can do that will help their morale, and I hope you will look into that for me and push that along.
I'm going to make a note now to bring it up at our July meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hahn.
Thank you.
Anybody else who wishes to be heard on this nomination? Seeing none, let's prepare the roll and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Congratulations on your reappointment.
Thank you very much.
Send that forthwith to the mayor. I'd like to reconsider items 2 and 13, if we can put those both for us. I know there's some folks that were stuck outside and were able to put some public speaker cards that were triggered on number 2. And we'll see if there's action on 13 to reopen the public hearing. Please prepare the roll and tabulate the vote on reconsideration.
13 ayes.
Okay. If we can take item 2 first, please. There are cards from the public on this, so if we can take up item 2 out of order. If there's no objection, Matthew Salata will be our first speaker. Mr. Salata, if you'd like to come forward, please, to the podium. You have 2 minutes. Is Mr. Salata here? Is there Pedro Montes de Ora? Please, sir, if you come to the podium. Welcome. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. Just right there at the podium? Right there? Thank you.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Pedro Montes de Oca, and I've owned the property on 1520 North Avenue 56 since 1972. That request that we have on the vacation of Eaton, my main concern is security. There's a lot of people who go right there and do unusual things. It's a vacant lot, and they normally throw a lot of trash there. There's been a few fires on that particular lot, and we have been obligated. At least I've been cleaning that vacant lot for about 30 years at my own cost. I was cited once by the fire department because I was unable to clean it. So even though it's the city's responsibility, I'm the one who wound up doing that. In addition to that, I'd like to mention that if something should happen to any citizen going into that vacant area, the city would be liable for whatever happens to them because it's a city property. But in vacating the Eaton property, then the burden would be placed on the adjacent homeowners, which we would be fencing it. We'd probably put a driveway to make a garage in the rear of the yard, whatever is permitted. And those are our main reasons, our main concerns for having to request a vacationing of Eaton Street. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Megan Whitmarsh.
Hi, thank you for taking the time to listen. I'm also an adjacent property owner, and I bought my house in 2001, and my main intention for requesting the vacation is to beautify and to be able to maintain the property. It has been a problem with being a place where a lot of trash basically gets dumped all the time, and I've put up signs and people seem to ignore them. And it's also, there have been a couple fires, as my neighbor indicated. And I also have to clean up after, kids and vagrants hanging out there quite a bit. So my main concern is just to beautify and to maintain that area. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I can just remind folks to please keep their conversations to a minimum around the horseshoe. Yamina, I'm sorry, I can't quite read the last name, Sipping? Spivak? Sipping? I'm sorry, can't quite read the handwriting. Would you say your name for the record, ma'am?
Yanina Sapiri.
Sapiri. Okay, thank you.
So I am also asking to vacate the alley that is right in front of Venice High School. It's been a problem for many, many years, and what we would like to do is...
I'm sorry to cut you off. I think that's for item number 1, and I may have misread the card. We're on item 2, which is a different vacation, so if I could ask you just to hold on 2 minutes, we'll take that up right next.
Okay.
My apologies. Matthew Salata, one last time? Not? Okay. Anybody wishing to be heard on this item? If not, let's open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
That is approved. We can take up item number 1 now, and my apologies, ma'am. Why don't you come back on this one?
Okay. Since you know my name already,
Yes.
so I just can quickly sum up. The alley is right in front of Venice High School, and it's been a problem for many, many years. We used to have students ditching school, smoking pot and all this jazz, so now it's been closed off. And we would like this alley to become part of our property. No one's been using it, and it's kind of hard to maintain it since there is no water in there. We'd like to bring down the wall, divide it between my neighbor and myself, and just beautify it, put grass in it, plant trees. And I think it's going to not only beautify the neighborhood, but it's also going to be additional income for the city since our taxes are going to go up. So it's a great idea. There is nothing to prevent it from happening, and I would appreciate if it's just you give it a green light and let's start making our city safer and more beautiful.
Thank you very much. We had one last, Kevin Kello. I know you've informed us that as a forward that if it was going to go through, you didn't need to speak, but you're welcome to, either way. I think there's no opposition to it.
2 minutes.
Okay, please, go ahead. Kevin Kello.
I represent Penny Muck, who is the neighbor of Miss Sipivi. Penny would be here herself, but she's taking her daughter on a vacation. I can't agree more with what Ms. Sipivi stated. I toured the property yesterday. There is a tall gate, 8 to 10 feet tall, approximately 15 feet across, heavy chain link, a lock. It is very degrading to the neighborhood. Otherwise, the neighborhood is pretty. My client and Ms. Sipivi intend, if the council passes this motion, to beautify that area. I do believe it will improve the values of the neighboring properties. And as we know, most types of nefarious conduct occur in these public areas. This is a blocked-off alleyway. People can still hop over the fence. There used to be fires there, prostitution, drug use. People who want to engage in this type of unlawful conduct, they go to areas where it is a public alleyway, a public street, a public sidewalk, because there's no individual private property owner to call the police, to beautify the area, to put up lighting, to plant shrubbery, to otherwise landscape the property. There truly is no reason why the council should not follow the recommendation of the city engineer and vacate this public way and allow the neighbors to beautify this area. I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Rosendahl has pressed his speaker button to be heard. I'd like to recognize... Oh,
Just basically
I'm sorry.
say that we do have a $50,000 reward out there to catch the assailants that killed a young man at the Venice High School. And obviously, my office is working with the constituent and trying to resolve the other issue. Just wanted to restate the $50,000.
My apologies. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl. If nobody else wishes to be heard on this one, let's open the roll on this item, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
That is approved. Those are both approved. Next item, please.
Next item, Mr. President, is item number 6, and the amending motion has been distributed to the council members.
Okay. Anybody wishing to be heard on this? If not, please prepare the roll and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Thank you. That is approved. Next item, please.
Next item, Mr. President, is item number 13, and that was called special. There are cards from the public on this item.
I believe there's already been a public hearing on this, but I called that special. We've had a public hearing, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
Mr. President.
I'm going to hand over the chair.
Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Grewal. If I could, I know we've had the public hearing on this, but I would ask folks' indulgence. I know we heard on this item a few weeks ago as well, but I would move that we do, I think there's 6 or 7 public speaker cards there, just a minute per speaker. And I know in committee we heard that, but I would move that, and I will make some comments following that, if there's no objection.
Thank you. Seeing no objection, I'd like to call the following individuals. Each will have 1 minute. Ziggy Cruz, Casey Schmidt, Maggie Pena, followed by Robert Silverstein. And then I'll...
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I got to say, it's harder to get to be heard by the city council nowadays than it is to get an audition with the Pope. Anyway, with that said, I'm here on item 13 to kind of hope that you will not vote on it today. I'm not saying don't vote on it ever, but today, because there is an investigation coming to Los Angeles from the Government Accountability Office, which will put pretty much each and every one that is voting on it under the microscope to see where the money actually goes on that. And $180 million for a affordable housing component, it's $2-some million per unit, which is like not in my reach of affordable housing. So I'm urging you right now not to do that today, pretty much just table the item and come back at a later time. At the same time, while I still have some time here, I would like to invite all of you to our first anniversary rally for the Kelo decision versus New London, where the government has voted to take away private property to give it to a private developer. So it's on Friday at 4 o'clock in front of the building from Bernard Luggage. Thank you.
Thank you. Casey Schmidt? Again, if I could ask Maggie Pena to come up and Robert Silverstein behind her, that'll save us some time.
Thank you. My name is Casey Schmidt. I'm a resident of Hollywood, and I'm very concerned over the eminent domain issue. This particular project in Hollywood is troublesome, and not only to me, but also to the also to the Government Accounting Office, for they've launched a congressional federal investigation. While this is the first time I've spoken here before this committee, other members of the community have been here and have expressed their concerns, and time again, this council has voted to go forward with this project. We urge you, we think that it would show great wisdom of this council if you would wait to vote until this investigation is completed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Pena?
Good morning. My family owns a juice bar in Hollywood. We've been there for over 30 years on Vine Street. I've been raised in Hollywood. I love Hollywood. I'm all for Hollywood improving and making it a better place for all of us and for the tourists, because we felt bad that for the longest time the tourists looked around and Hollywood was an ugly place, so we're all for Hollywood. But we're also, because as small business people, we're for the little guy as well. So I'm urging the City Council to consider why the GAO is doing a study on eminent domain. The GAO, usually gets in and does studies because, they want to see what's out there. And I hate to say it, but the GAO usually uncover stuff that, is dirty laundry in a lot of the studies. So let's hold off on a $180 million bond. It's our taxpayer money until the GAO has done the study. I mean, do we know how long the study is going to take? Is it going to take 10 years to do? Is it going to take 6 months? So, before we dole out big cash, let's make sure we know what's transpired. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Silverstein, be followed by Matt Dowd and Michael Hunt, Rachel Silsby, and Dale Goldsmith.
Thank you. My name is Robert Silverstein. I'm an attorney with the Silverstein Law Firm, and I represent Bob Blue and Bernard Luggage. Bernard Luggage is the oldest family-owned business at Hollywood and Vine. They have been there for 60 years, and they are on the chopping block because this council and the CRA have approved a project to take them out in favor of a W Hotel. Today you're seeking an application or approval of an application for $180 million in bonds. We object to that. The bonds are improperly being used for other things than the multifamily housing portion of the project, including the luxury condos and the luxury hotel. Misrepresentations have been made to the public and to this city council. On April 26, Council President Garcetti and Helmi Hissarek of the CRA had a discussion publicly, and I will quote from that. Ms. Hissarek said, quote, "The bonds are a form of debt financing that will be used for the affordable apartments." Council President Garcetti, quote, "Just for the affordable, so that the luxury ones cannot be used, cannot be subsidized by the SIDLAC bonds that are being used?" Ms. Hissarek, yes. Mr. Garcetti, okay, I just wanted to clarify that. However, in court papers, the CRA and the developer have now admitted that those statements to the council on April 26 were false, and that in fact the bonds will be used for the luxury housing and for the luxury hotel, including the taking of my client's property.
Thank you. Your minute is up. If I could ask you just to conclude.
Thank you. We will be objecting at the TEFRA hearing if this is approved, and we will be filing a federal lawsuit alleging fraud on the public and violation of the federal tax laws if this matter goes forward.
Thank you. Mr. Dowd, Mr. Hunt.
Good morning. I just want to register my support for the little guy. Once again, we hear people, obviously, that they come down and make a point, and the City Council has opportunities to actually make landmark decisions, and set aside some of these bigger, capital interests, and, look out for some of the history and the heritage. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hunt.
Good morning again, City Council. Big interest, big money. Is it all up under you guys' houses, or where's it going? The small people need a break here, and that's what they're saying. It goes back to the landmark, the good housing for the old-time people that's been there. It's evidence that, these people with these big corporations want the money, and they want to destroy people's livelihoods. Let's take a look at it again.
Rochelle Silsby, followed by Dale Goldsmith.
Good morning, honorable council members. My name is Rochelle Silsby, and I'm the Vice President of Public Policy for the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. On behalf of the Chamber and our Board of Directors, I'm here in support of the issuance of the multifamily housing bonds. These bonds would make it possible to finance the 179 affordable housing units. As I'm sure you're all aware, there is a shortage of affordable housing in the Hollywood community. Your support of this important issuance of these bonds would make it possible for affordable housing to come to Hollywood. Again, on behalf of the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce, I urge you to support this issuance. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Goldsmith.
Honorable Council members, Dale Goldsmith with the law firm of Armbruster and Goldsmith, representing the project applicants, Legacy Partners 2480 and HGI Gatehouse Hollywood. I'd like to briefly respond to a couple of the points raised, both orally and in writing, by Mr. Silverstein. One, I'd like to confirm that the Bond money will only be used for the apartment component of the project and not for the hotel, and this is consistent with all of SIDLAC's requirements. Secondly, I'd like to respond to the apparent attack on the personal integrity of CRA board member Madeline Janice Aparicio. They assert that she was conflicted and it was improper that she voted on this TEFRA financing. Under California law, to be conflicted, she must have a financial interest. She has no such interest. Lane, who employs her, has no such interest, nor does HERE, which supports some of Lane's objectives. Although individual members may benefit from the numerous public benefits of the project, these benefits will inure to the community as a whole and not to any specific individual. Therefore, there is no conflict. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That ends public comment. Mr. Garcetti.
Ask staff to come forward from CRA, just again for the record. There's some staff from CRA who might be able to answer just a question or two about the project. Thanks. If you guys would come forward. Colleagues, while they're coming forward, I want to just update folks on what's been happening, because in the last few days, you know, a lot of the eminent domain piece, as not just in the last few days, but in the last few months, why don't you come forward to the table, please? Come forward, all the way to the table. Has sat in a way that's uneasy with me, and I want to state very clearly on the record what our role has been in mediating between Mr. Blue and the CRA. And I think they've been very good discussions. Ziggy, I know, has been there, and we appreciate her activism. A number of the folks from the community have been a part of that. Mr. Silverstein obviously has been there representing his client, and I think it would be fair to represent that all three of us have seen progress there, and I remain very optimistic, too, that that can be resolved in a way short of any eminent domain, because that would be the right thing to do in this case, and I'm very optimistic that we will be able to, as it were, help the little guy and do the right thing here. In terms of a lot of other little guys that are out there in Hollywood right now, I know our per capita income for our family is under $22,000 in the Hollywood area. So the 200 to 300 jobs that will be generated here, living wage jobs, are very important when thinking about the little guy who right now is shut out, unfortunately, of a lot of work opportunities, or has been in the past, as well as the affordable housing units. I'm not a specialist in SIDLAC law, I'm not a specialist in this, but I do want to ask again for the record, that this bonds, well, first of all, it was represented that this is $180 million of public money, as if we're spending $180 million of our own money. Is that correct? Are we spending $180 million of city money on this?
No, that is not correct.
Would you identify yourself for the record, too, please?
Michael Miller, a senior finance officer with the Community Redevelopment Agency. And no, that is not correct. The money that's being used comes from tax increment from the Hollywood redevelopment project.
But the $180 million does not come from tax increment fund. The bonds, those pieces that are being authorized are essentially a financing mechanism from that.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So we're not paying this out. I want to be very clear. We don't have $180 million that we're paying out that we will not ever see again, that is not money put into the project. This is a financing mechanism, as we've done with Industrial Development Authority, loans on schools, as we've done on housing all the time, and we need to prove that here under the state requirements, correct?
That is correct.
Here. Okay. And how many units of affordable housing are part of this?
79.
79.
I'd like to correct. It was
Yeah,
said
I heard
179. There's
It's
79 units, yes.
I want to be clear about that as well. Lastly, the Juice Bar is a business that I know that I've had conversations with the CRA about specifically. Can you represent any of the conversations you've had, if it's appropriate, in terms of keeping some of the businesses that are there in the new project to make sure, it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Juice Bar doesn't own the land but owns the business, correct? And so we could keep them having a business in the same way right there. I know many of the CRA employees love the Juice Bar. I myself do as well, and it has been an amazing and positive place there. And it's been an important priority to me to keep as many of the businesses that want to stay as possible with, obviously, working with a developer. Could you represent those conversations?
Let me introduce myself. My name is Isabel Rivero. I'm with the Community Redevelopment Agency. The agency's relocation department has been working with all the tenants that are located within the project area, both in the residential for rent component, which is what this bond issue will be used for, and the hotel and the condominium component. The Juice Bars is located on property that is currently owned by the MTA. They're operating Juice Bar. The MTA has retained the same relocation consultant the redevelopment agency has, and they're assisting them in locating to a new location. The juice bar also owns or also occupies a space that is currently owned by, the CRA is currently acquiring through the eminent domain process and negotiations. And it's a storage facility. We're also working with them very closely on relocating that. And it is my understanding that their interest is to try to relocate both together in this new facility. And I also understand that the developer has engaged in conversations with the juice bar and trying to bring them back to the project once it's completed.
Okay. I'm also very sensitive in the construction time. That can be the difference for a small business of whether or not they survive or not in that in-between time. So I'd like to ask the CRA to work on any possibilities in the redevelopment area, as well as we see other things that might be completed earlier, whether they can have a presence someplace, and any of those businesses. And if we can just attach as an amendment that desire to ask the CRA to work closely with those small businesses, as you have been, to ensure that. I think it is an important part of the character of Hollywood, and I'm sure you sympathize with that as well. One last thing for the record, and I appreciate that our friend from the Juice Bar called it a study, because when folks were saying there's a GAO investigation, which is a formal term that they do use, I immediately picked up the phone. I've shared some of the same hesitations on eminent domain, and they very clearly stated to us that this is not an investigation. There's an ongoing study. We're one of a dozen cities or so that they're looking at, and just looking at many of the issues around eminent domain, not with any particular thesis, not looking for malfeasance as much as looking for what the policy implications of eminent domain are, and I wanted to state that very clearly for the record as well. Again, colleagues, I ask for your support on this, and know that we are working extremely hard. I've been spending a good deal of my personal time in direct contact with Mr. Blue, other community members that are concerned. I'm confident we can move forward with that piece of property and keeping Mr. Blue there, and helping the little guy without using eminent domain, and hopefully in this next week we'll be able to finalize that. So thank you, and I ask you for your support.
Thank you. Mr. Zine?
Commend my colleague, Council President Garcetti, for what you've done to Hollywood. I was up there recently in the evening hours, and it's a tremendous turnaround from what it was in the past. A lot of activity, a lot of people out there spending money, enjoying the opportunities, bringing back the image of Hollywood as it used to be. I have a question regarding some of the questions that came up from the public speakers. The 79 units, the rent, when we talk about the affordability, what are we talking about dollars rent per unit? Because it was mentioned it's an affordable unit, 79 units. Obviously, we want to provide housing and make it affordable. But my question is, when we talk about affordability, how much are we talking about in rent for a one-bedroom, a two-bedroom? What are the rents, the range on the rents?
Hi. My name is Victor Hsu. I'm with Fulbright & Jaworski, a law firm based in Los Angeles, California. We're bond counsel on this project. State law under the Health and Safety Code specifies the maximum rents that can be charged for these affordable units. In addition, we believe that Section 42 tax credits are going to be used to help finance this project. That adds another overlay of rent regulation for these units. It's my understanding that the current plans call for these units to be rented out to families earning 50% of area median income.
I understand that, but when you hear 50% of median income, people then identify the dollar. Is it $1,000? Is it $1,500? Is it $800?
Oh.
We talk about affordability. How much are we talking about a one-bedroom? How much are we talking about a two-bedroom? Because we mix it all up with all these different formulas, and then the public says, okay, that's great, but how much is it going to cost me? I'm making so much money. How much is affordability when we talk about rent? So the formula is one issue. Can you just explain to me how many dollars it's going to cost for a one-bedroom or two-bedroom, the high and the low? That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't have that specific information.
Does anyone have that specific information?
My recollection is that for the range of single, one-bedroom, two bedrooms, the rents are under $800.
Under $800 for a one-bedroom?
Yes, okay. and I believe it's significantly under that, but I don't have the specific number here.
Well, that's obviously very, very reasonable. Well, what about a two-bedroom?
Well, that was for the full range.
The two-bedroom's
Yeah,
$800?
Two-bedroom, I believe, is 800. I think the one-bedroom is in the mid-600 range.
Okay.
And again, I'm not specific on that.
But no, I just want to
those are-
ballpark so that the public can understand. We talk about affordability.
Yes.
$500, $800, under $1,000 obviously is affordable rent
That's
in this
correct.
region. When you talk about $2,000, $2,500 for rent, which is not uncommon in parts of the city, we're talking about affordability. So someone who's earning income and they can afford a residence that is a decent quality residence, and they don't have to go to an area that is ridden with crime and poverty, but they can have a nice, decent area to live, to reside, and still work at a wage that will compensate them according to that.
That's correct. These are significantly under market rates.
And there's qualification factors for people to obtain those.
That's correct.
Okay, great, thank you. Again, I want to congratulate you for making this happen to the community. It's a positive influence on the community.
Thank you, Mr. Zine and Mr. Garcetti. Madam Clerk, open the roll on this item. Oh, I'm sorry, it just showed up. Mr. Labange.
I was paying attention, Mr. Zine. Thank you. Leslie. Good morning. Madam Chair, and you know, it's a long process here, and I know there's been a lot of work, and I know a lot of people are concerned about things. It is difficult to see change, but I think the change is very exciting to understand the work that you've done, Mr. Garcetti, in this area. I know some of my constituents have concerns, but I think all are supportive of this, and all want to be fair, and I think that's one thing that's a hallmark of you, Eric, is that you're fair. It's just very tough as you get to this point here. I just wonder, any of these small businesses, when we relocate them, where do we relocate the small businesses?
Well, we try to relocate them as close to their current location as possible. Sometimes, though, businesses, we're thinking about moving and they get relocated further. We try to find a location, and again, our relocation specialists work with them.
I like your idea of trying to get them as close to where they are, which is important, so that's a great value to have
Yes.
and to look at. And also, I'd like to ask, you know, the MTA, they have subway stations. Now, different this, and I know I was a board member for a while, but in other cities, there's villages amongst the station stops. And I hope they create villages in like the station stop on there's the platform floor where the subway is, and then there's the mid floor, and then there's the street level. I hope we could look to them and cooperate, because maybe there's potential possibility. I don't think there's a newsstand on Vine Street, on that side of Vine Street, but the orange juice stand and all the little stands that make sense to be, if you could work with the MTA on that in some way. But anyway, I know, Eric, it's been a long battle to try to make change in Hollywood, because I evoked the name of Peggy Stevenson, who in 1976 had a press conference on Hooray for Hollywood, and right there on Vine Street to try to turn this around. You've been the one that turned it around, and it's been a long push. And I know it's been difficult, especially for some who don't want to see any change. But I think the change will balance for a better Hollywood. So I thank you for your leadership. Thank the CRA, but really work to try to find them within you know, it's tough to, Zion, you were a motorcycle policeman. Remember Highs and Jacks at 8th and Olive, that little stand there? They'd make those Brooklyn shakes there at Jack and Highs.
I was out protecting and serving, didn't have time to spend there.
Oh, God, you stopped at every joint in town. Those little stands are important character to a community. So I just wanted to say that, to ask that, to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Labange. Madam Clerk, open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the votes.
13 ayes.
That item's been approved. Next item?
Next item, Madam President, is item number 20, and that was called special by Councilmember Labange.
Call on Ms. Gruhl as Chair of the Transportation Committee per our rules first, and then we'll head to Mr. Labange. Ms. Gruhl.
Thank you, Mr. Garcetti. I know we have staff present here. Mr. Willis? Hold my time while he walks up.
Good morning. Alan Willis
Good.
from the Department of Transportation.
Good morning. Colleagues, the item we have before us today is regarding hybrid vehicles and the fact that we've had a very successful pilot program in allowing them to park in metered parking for free. As we all know, sometimes it takes incentives for people to do the right thing, like buy hybrid vehicles that have low emissions that are going to improve our air, also have better gas mileage in a time in which we have incredibly high gas prices today. So this successful pilot program, they came back and reported that it was worth and it was encouraged to extend it to 2008, January 1st, 2008. Is that correct, Mr.
That's correct.
And so that we can continue to incentivize vehicles that utilize on the state level those yellow stickers. We all see them. They get to ride in the carpool lane. For those that can't ride in the carpool lane, you look longingly at those cars that are driving on the carpool lane. Well, now you'll get to see them park in a meter and not put any money in and wonder why. Well, it's because they have a hybrid vehicle, and we are trying to encourage those vehicles that are state standardized. We look forward to that. People ask, how much is this going to cost the city in revenue? And sometimes doing the right thing does mean it costs money. It hasn't cost us a whole lot in the last year, in the pilot year. I think the figures are somewhere between $32,000 to $65,000 and that we would see in the city of Los Angeles. I actually hope that we lose a little bit more revenue because we have more vehicles that are hybrids, because it will, again, demonstrate that we are committed to lowering emission standards and dealing with our environmental concerns, and that there'll come a time, maybe after January 1st, 2008, where we no longer have to give incentives for people to do the right thing, that in fact it's going to be common practice. I know a lot of people who had luxury vehicles that are now driving hybrids. It's the cool thing to do, and it's the right thing to do. So, colleagues, I ask for an aye vote today on this item to support improving our environment and to continue to provide incentives for hybrid vehicles in the city of Los Angeles. And I know my colleague, Mr. LaBonge, has a few questions, but I hope that we can, and I know Mr. LaBonge supports this as well, the encouragement of having more hybrid vehicles in the city of Los Angeles. So thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Mr. President, and ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. LaBonge.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Gruhl, thank you very much. Mr. Willis, how many parking meters do we have in the city of Los Angeles?
Approximately 40,000.
40,000. And you say this is only $60,000 a year that probably it does affect?
That's our estimate, based on the
Estimated
current
that.
usage.
Now, here's the tough question. How many tickets did you issue for people who violated the meter's hour limit?
I don't know that figure.
Do you think that's a good number to know, though? I mean, are people sitting there all day because they're in a hybrid?
No, they don't get to sit there all day.
I know, but you would know if you knew how many tickets were given, right?
I'm not sure whether we have it broken down by type of vehicle.
Right, but I think I'm going to support the pilot extension. But look at to make sure, because I have a lot of meters in my district. Who has the most meters in their district? The 9th district, probably.
Yes, the 9th district. Yes.
Then the Wilshire districts of the 1st and the 4th and the 10th and the 5th in that area there. Yeah. Where was the first parking meter in the city of Los Angeles?
Lankershim Boulevard.
Very good. And who represents Lankershim Boulevard?
See, let me guess.
All right, there. Okay, there. Anyway, look at that stat, because I want to encourage hybrid, as you said. It was a good argument that you made in presentation to your committee, Ms. Gruhl, but I also want to make sure we're not giving it away overwhelmingly, because there's so many more hybrids now, and parking next to transportation mobility is the #1 frustration for Angelenos, to find a place to park. So would you look at that, talk to Mr. Price, and maybe they could get a little mark on the computer, because they're all computerized tickets, right?
Yes.
We have 40,000 meters. How many tickets do we issue a year? A million?
3 million.
3 million
30
tickets,
million. I think it's
40,000.
30 million.
Right, street cleaning and all those other things. All righty, I'm going to support the report, but ask that you look at that. Do you need a friendly amendment, or can you just do that, Alan?
I can do that.
You can do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. LaBonge. Next speaker is Mr. Smith.
Well, thank you, and I will support this, but when I was on the T committee, I was very concerned about the fiscal impact, not today, not tomorrow, but certainly in years to come. And so we put that sunset time frame in there, and I think it's important. I think it's important the department do everything they can to track this for us, because at some point in time, hybrids will become the norm rather than the exception to the norm. And when that point comes, we can no longer afford to be giving away that incentive. And we want to be there at the beginning to incentivize this.
But as you see in the last couple of years, the purchasing of hybrids has been quadrupling over just a couple of years now. And so it's becoming very popular. I've turned in both my city car and my personal car to buy hybrids, so it's obviously becoming very popular. But we want to make sure we're very careful. So I hope you'll do everything you can to track this for us so that when we come back in 2008 and look at it, we can say, okay, we want to continue it, or the time has come to discontinue it because we no longer need to be pushing the marketplace, but recognize the fact that it has a fiscal impact on us. So I'm glad that we've got that date in there, and I hope you'll continue to monitor for us so we can be making an intelligent decision a couple of years from now when this comes back. So thank you.
Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you, Ms. Perry. Colleagues, I want to thank you for the discussion around this. I was very proud when this first started to introduce this legislation on this, and it built on what Mr. Padilla did with electric cars. I've driven an electric car for the last 9 years. Our second car at home is a hybrid, and so between the two of us, we have half a car, hopefully, in terms of pollutants, and I think it's really working to incentivize people, and the success speaks for itself. There's hardly a month that doesn't go by that our office doesn't get calls about people who are getting ticketed, and we appreciate the ongoing training and just retraining, and it gets more and more difficult the more and more cars that become hybrid. It's a good problem to have, but there's many hybrid owners out there I know who have said, I've gotten a ticket, I'm doing the right thing. We always are able to work through those tickets and make sure that, you know, as long as there wasn't a violation of the time, because you still have to abide by the time limitations, but if somebody got a ticket simply for not putting something in the meter when they were a hybrid, that can be taken care of. So we appreciate the department's ongoing vigilance with that as well. And I look forward to that day, absolutely, Mr. Smith, where we can abolish this because we've been so successful. But in some ways, it's that short-term, or sorry, it's that long-term cost of living cheap in the short term that we're addressing here. It's the cost of pollution, it's the cost of health care, it's the cost of increased cancer and asthma rates when we don't all take collective responsibility for the quality of the air in our basin. And this is what is allowing us through this program to really make sure that not just, I think a lot of our foreign car makers that have been great, and Ford has started, but that our domestic car makers hear the message loud and clear, that we want hybrid cars, we want alternative fuel vehicles, and we want the opportunity to contribute to the solution here in the basin. I know Ms. Perry, as our representative on the Air Quality Management District, has been a powerful voice in cleaning up the air here, but we don't want to be the dirty air capital of the country anymore. Los Angeles, we can breathe easier today than we could 20 years ago, but this is a very important way of going forward and making sure. So we ask people out there who are watching, get a hybrid, go green, help reduce greenhouse gases, clean up the air here, and this is our small way of rewarding that action that you take too. So thank you very much, and I'm sure this will go forward, and we appreciate the department's support of this too.
Ms. Gruhl. Thank you, Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you, Mr. Garcetti, for your leadership on this issue. Just a few other points I wanted to make. One is on the enforcement issue and the questions that people maybe have gotten tickets in the past. The new proposal that's before us makes it easier for enforcement because they will be required to have those same stickers that they have in the state of California on the side. Is that correct, Mr. Wilson?
That's correct.
Okay. Also, it's important to note that individuals must still abide by the rules. If it says only 2-hour parking, they only get 2 hours, they just get those 2 hours free. So we want to make that clear to anyone who might be listening or watching today. And lastly, for the individuals who asked about the cost and the timing and incentives, the January 1st, 2008 coincides with the state's ending of their program. Is that correct, Mr. Wilson?
That's correct.
So the concept is that for a period of time, I think as Mr. Smith mentioned, we want to provide incentives. At some point, it becomes a reward for doing what they, doing the right thing. This is the incentives, and the reason there is that 2008 deadline is specifically for that purpose, that we hope, as mentioned earlier, people are going to do this for the right reasons. But right now, we're encouraging the auto industry to produce more hybrids to get them out on the road. So just great that we have so much support here today and look forward to beginning. This is not just a pilot, but a continuation until January 1st of 2008. Thank you for the leadership of the department as well and for your coming forward with great recommendations. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gruhl. All right, there's no further speakers on the queue, so please open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Thank you very much. Next item.
Next item, Madam President, item number 37 was called special by Councilmember Parks, and there are cards on this item.
I'd like to recognize Mr. Parks.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to ask the city staff, Paula and her staff, to come up. And colleagues, basically, this is an issue from a motion in which started off with looking at the reclassification of domestic violence in the city of LA from Part 1 to Part 2. At the same time, Paula was doing a report about the police response to domestic violence that was requested by the Police Commission. And although her report is in draft form, we did hear that before the committee, and I'd like her to give you some of the highlights of that report because it would give us a basis of our other concerns about the reclassification.
And Mr. Parks, just as a FYI, we do have 2 public speaker cards, so whenever you'd want to take those best, but we can...
In fact, we'll have Paula do hers, and then we'll bring the public speaker.
Wonderful. Please.
Thank you. Good morning, council members. My name is Paula Petrata, Executive Director of the Commission on the Status of Women.
Paula, speak into the mic.
And with me is Chandra Mosley, Commission staff as well. As Councilmember Parks stated, the Commission on the Status of Women was tasked to put together a statistical report on domestic violence. This was in response to the murder of Officer Ricardo Lizarga in 2004, who responded to a domestic violence scene unaware of the dangers that were ahead of him. And as you know, he was killed. What we found, and let me just say just for the record that while the data presented in this report represents a picture of how domestic violence crime has been handled by the police department and the LA City Attorney's Office, the data is complete and insufficient to draw full conclusions, which is part of the problem that we have, I believe, in the city of LA. But what I would like to point to is some of the highlights of that report. As you know, we talked about looking at the incidence of domestic violence calls between the years 2001, 2003. And in those years, there was a 3% increase in the overall number of domestic violence calls to LAPD. However, while the proportion of domestic violence calls to the Los Angeles Police Department gradually increased, the proportion of responding to those calls decreased. And in fact, filed incident crime reports decreased 7%. Arrests decreased 22%. With trend data showing an overall decline in the police department's follow-up to domestic violence-related requests for service with incident crime reports and arrests, it is really important to examine the geographical spread or concentration of these requests and their response rates to really better diagnose where improvement efforts should be focused. And clearly, this report shows that we need to do a better job. Another key identified problem that we saw was that the police department divisions with the highest number of DV violence cases had some of the lowest rate of calls that resulted in reports and arrests. Conversely, the police department divisions with the lowest number of domestic violence calls had the second highest rate of calls that resulted in incident crime reports and overall highest rates in arrests. I think some of the recommendations, and clearly what we found is that there is a clear need to have a centralized data tracking system. And I would just like to say that this certainly coincides with Councilmember Parks' issue relative to Part 1 crimes. As they have been reported, our board took a formal action to support him in his efforts to have transparency when we talk about how we report domestic violence calls. The second recommendation was that we need to share best practices to improve response efforts. By collecting more comprehensive data and creating a centralized database on domestic violence cases, the department can begin to discern what factors contribute to poor poorer or better police follow-up. This would enable the important study of those divisions that had greater success in reporting crimes and arrests in order to learn from them. While all divisions had substantial room for improvement, understanding what contributes to the greatest success and considering whether or not those practices can be adapted to other police divisions is really worth exploring. And then, of course, the reason that we're here is, as public policy makers, how do we allocate domestic violence resources? Once a centralized data tracking system is developed, it is important for this data to inform the allocation of resources to provide more support for those divisions that have the highest concentration of requests for services related to domestic violence. We feel that we need to continue through this process to really look at how domestic violence is reported and adjudicated in the city of Los Angeles. This is a first attempt to do that, and certainly coincides with Councilmember Parks' efforts to continue to report domestic violence as Part 1 crimes. I think the danger of not doing that really undermines a lot of the work that advocates, the city has done in the past to make domestic violence, put it on our radar screen as one of the most difficult and dangerous public safety issues that the city is dealing with today. And if there's any questions, Councilor?
You refer to page 6, and you had some specific concerns about how the department is addressing the issue of the domestic violence restraining orders.
Yes, one of the things that we actually need to look at is the fact that in many cases when police officers respond to a scene, they are not alerting the victim that they have the right to take out an emergency protection order and possibly referring them someplace else, or not even indicating to them that they have the right to do that.
Okay.
That's a big problem.
Okay. Also, you commented on basically the lack of response to calls such as making reports, making arrests. Isn't there a state law that mandates certain mandatory reporting and mandatory arrest in the state of California?
Well, you know, there are mandatory arrests, my understanding is, in domestic violence. However, my understanding of that is whether, in fact, they can actually see that there's bruises or that kind of thing. But we also know that sometimes that does not happen. In some cases, you don't necessarily see the bruising. And in those cases, they may not be actually filing those reports. And one of the things that in fact, Chandra can speak to this relative to the amount of time that officers go out on a call at a location.
Okay. If the calls are considered low priority because there's no imminent threat to the victim at the location, of course the call is going to have a longer response time. And so, you know, in the instance of a domestic violence situation, the suspect himself or herself may be within proximity of the location with weapons that may not be known or told to the PSR at the time of the call, and that can escalate and obviously cause you know, great bodily harm, especially if the officers are not responsive in an adequate time.
And another issue, and we don't know this may be rectified even as we're speaking, but at this time, one of the problems that we found is a police officer may go and respond to a domestic violence location and not know that there had been 2 or 3 other calls because they were not necessarily reported accurately. And so their safety is really a major concern because now they're showing up on a scene not knowing what the particular history has been.
Yeah. And I think the major part of your study shows that where we have the most violence, the 8th District, 9th District, the north part of the 15th,
right,
and the 10th District, that the calls are coming in at a high volume.
Right.
But what's happening to those calls, or they're not turning them into arrest or crime reports. And so basically the lack of service as it relates to those victims.
Well, and again, what this deserves is greater analysis because you're absolutely right. In 77th Division, for instance, they had the greatest calls, but the least amount of reports and the least amount of arrests. They ranked number 15 in terms of arrests. They had 3,445 calls, and they had 613 arrests that were made out of 3,000, ranking number 15 in all of the divisions.
And we also know that 77th leads the city in homicides year after year, and I forget the figure, but there's a very high percentage of homicides that are related to domestic violence.
I believe there were 31 homicides in 2003 that we were able to. And that's the other problem. We don't coordinate with the district attorney's office either. So we don't have their numbers, so we don't really have a good snapshot of what's happening in the city and county of LA, because as you know, some of the cases are felony cases and go on to the district attorney's office for adjudication. So all of this said and done is, it seems to us that we need to do a better job in aggregating data, correct data, to really address and mitigate domestic violence.
Okay, thank you.
Would you like to hear
have the
public comment
and
at
then
this
we'll-
time? Thank you, Mr. Parks. Colleagues, we will open public comment. We have the following three speakers: Wendy Vaughn from Neighborhood Legal Services, Belinda Jo Wright, and N. Tafai. Please.
Good morning. My name is Wendy Vaughn. I'm an attorney at Neighborhood Legal Services. We provide free, low-cost legal services to victims of domestic violence. I supervise 4 of our emergency restraining order clinics in 4 LA City courthouses. The data that the Commission has reported is consistent with the experiences of victims in crisis who come to our clinics. The number of victims that we see in our clinics has increased steadily over time. We see something between 200 and 300 victims per month in our courthouse clinics. These victims report to us that although the police have been called and the police come to the scene and they've spoken with the police at their home, that they did not get an incident report, that they do not have a police report. In talking with victims further, the minority of victims tell us that there has been an arrest. There's very few arrests in the cases that we're seeing. The data that was reported by the Commission is very important because it does, in fact, drive the decisions that we make in the city about how we spend our resources and how we're addressing the problem of domestic violence. It's critical that we not only adopt the 3 recommendations of the Commission, that we put our money where our mouth is, and that we fund a centralized tracking system so that we can understand better what is happening in the city. Why is it that while the calls related to domestic violence are increasing, the number of reports have decreased and the number of arrests have decreased? What is at the bottom of these statistics? And the only way that we're going to understand that is if we continue to fund the Commission to make these reports, and if we commit to creating a centralized tracking system. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Belinda Jo Wright. Ms. Wright?
Oh, I think it's a great idea because in the household that I grew up in, I wasn't really exposed to things like persons who would do harm to people that are basically the weaker sex or whatever. I mean, not as strong, and taking advantage of individuals. So I think this is this is like pretty terrific. And oh, I have something for you. Do you want? Oh, this is for Ms. Gould. Here you go. Here's the bill.
Thank you, Ms. Wright.
Good morning. My name is Nikki Tasfai. I'm the director of the African Community Resource Center and Refugee Safe Haven. We have a shelter in West Hollywood area, and my concern is I support the data the Commission of Status Women they have done. But the concern I have is there are immigrant refugee women which they have not report that they are a victim of domestic violence. Majority of them, when they come to my office, they need a job. Then after they do the intake, we found out they are a victim domestic violence women. In order to have a good tracking system, I would like the Commission of Status Women to have a database which they are working closely with all the service provider, meaning the shelter providers. If they got enough funding, we will get a good tracking record for victim domestic violence. Thank you.
Thank you. Our first speaker, Mr. Parks.
One comment is that Ms. Vaughn didn't mention that she represents a law firm that actually handled one of the first cases before the City of LA is Lula Mae Thomas that created the city's efforts to deal with domestic violence, and so I just wanted to comment on that.
Thank you. Ms. Perry.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I wanted to go on record as well as expressing my great concern and the offense, I think, as a woman that I do take to the reclassification of crimes that most would consider to be crimes of domestic violence. I am also very upset and concerned, especially in the community that I represent, Mr. Parks as well, about the failure to do any outreach, not only to council members, but to our communities, and in particular, the providers who provide the support and the shelter and the recovery services to those who are victims of domestic violence. And there's been no mention or even consideration of the historical significance of what the providers do to help people through a process to recovery. I think that outweighs and is far more important than downgrading statistics because it denies us down the road opportunities for federal funding, for more programmatic options. It diminishes issues that may arise potentially in the course of the census, which only occurs every 10 years. And whatever prism this was looked at, it apparently was very narrow and not taking into consideration the importance of funding on the front end as a form of not only law enforcement, but prevention. So I would like to join with Mr. Parks in looking to see what we can do to reclassify crimes of domestic violence to their original status.
Thank you, Ms. Perry. Ms. Hahn.
Thank you, Madam President. Well, I just am rising. I would like for the CLA to come to the table and answer the questions. I have real concerns. Number one, I have real concerns that we've reclassified this very serious crime. So we've just reclassified that, unbeknownst to a lot of us, and I don't think this body ever was allowed to take a policy position on that, on whether or not that was good for us. And now to hear, after we've reclassified it, now we're hearing from you, Paula, that, you know, response time is an issue. We're also hearing from some of the audience members that incident reports are an issue. And I have real concerns, particularly because Los Angeles, I think, has been one of the great cities in this country that for the last, 20-something years has made domestic violence a serious crime. I mean, we wanted to send a message to all those who would be involved in domestic crime that we took it seriously. And we really wanted to give a message to women and children in the city of Los Angeles that we took this extremely seriously. It was a violent crime. We wanted it to be reported as a violent crime. And we wanted the organizations who are out there, who are working with domestic violence victims, that they could count on us, they could count on our reporting, they could count on our statistics to help them get the kind of money they need to really work with the domestic violence victims. So both of these issues are troubling to me, and I think they might have a correlation. I'm not sure, but that's what it sounds like to me. So one of the things that when I went to the committee, I asked for a report back from our CLA to address some of these concerns. I want an independent analysis of the Commission on the Status of Women's report, on LAPD's statistic gathering. I want to have an independent third party analyze what we're hearing, make some recommendations, because I think we're on a trend backwards for the city of Los Angeles. I think we're on a trend backwards for the women in this city and for the children in this city. That we may be acting like it's safer, we may be acting like our statistics are proving something differently, but in fact, what we're hearing is it's not a safer place for women and it's not a safer place for children, and our public policy ought to reflect that, and then we ought to make sure that LAPD responds to our concerns about this still being a #1 priority. And as we know, domestic violence spawns a vicious cycle of a downward trend for families, for children. Children do worse in school, they're less likely to graduate. It just spawns a vicious cycle that I was believing in Los Angeles we were starting to break. We were starting to change that downward trend, but now with both of these instances of reclassifying the crime and with less response times or slower response times, I'm not happy about this. So maybe you could tell me where you are in terms of your independent report and what you think is going to come from that, and when we might expect your report on analyzing both of these issues.
Brent Scott from the CLA's office. We, of course, are fully supportive of the work the Commission has done. We agree it's important to get this right. I will get back to you on where we are on our independent analysis of the Commission's report. What we have been working on to date and are prepared to report on are the other fact-gathering and reporting mechanisms LAPD has. There is the internal procedure, which is extremely important to get right. We as a community need to know what is happening and what isn't happening. There are also other reporting issues that have to do with data involving domestic violence crimes. One is data that is submitted on a monthly basis on something called Return A to the federal government. Almost all jurisdictions in the country do this. That reporting is meant to report only Part 1 or violent crimes. That reporting is, by its nature, inaccurate. It does not reflect the nuances of what is happening here in Los Angeles or here in California, where we can prosecute even minor, so-called minor domestic crimes as felonies. That's not true in all other jurisdictions. The UCR guidelines are general, and they're meant to be general so that they apply to every jurisdiction in the United States. Under the UCR guidelines, unless an assault is aggravated, it cannot be listed as a Part 1 crime. So-called minor domestic violence assaults, if they don't include weapons or physical harm with parts of the body, cannot be classified as aggravated or violent assaults. If they are simple assaults under the UCR guidelines, they must be categorized as simple assaults. We understand that historically, we have reported differently under the UCR guidelines, and we have recently changed our reporting, our meaning LAPD's, reporting to conform with the UCR guidelines. That report will be coming forward from our office very soon. I think once the specificity of the UCR guidelines is understood, it will be more clear why LAPD elected to make that change. In addition to that, LAPD provides these publicly available statistics on their CompStat system. They're on the website. LAPD has included in their CompStat categories a section for child and spousal abuse, which includes both Part 1 and Part 2 crimes. You can see a comparison of the crimes to date with the crimes from the last prior to DPs or deployment periods, and also a comparison of the crimes to date with the prior year and then the year before that. LAPD has committed to our office at least, and I hope they've committed to you as well, that with respect to the reporting of statistics for these purposes, regardless of how these crimes are handled internally, but with respect to the reporting of these crimes, that they will make as much data available as is needed by the community.
Thank you. That was a lot of information to digest. When can we expect your report? And will there be recommendations as well after your analysis?
We are prepared to issue a report on the UCR guidelines, which is what we've been working on most intensively, I think within the next couple of days. I think it may take us a little while longer to do an independent analysis of the Commission's project.
Okay, but I think we all would like to see a report on what this truly means, not necessarily to the federal government or to other rating agencies. We want to know what this means to the residents of Los Angeles.
Understood.
And I would just, I'm sorry, Councilmember, just want to be a nudge here, but I think what's important, at least for us, is there's lots of files, lots of data everywhere. What we've tried to do, and I think what's important for the city, is that we look at it in a comprehensive manner so that we have a snapshot of what is happening. And that means calls taken, that means arrests made, reports done, and adjudication. I really do believe without looking at that, we're not going to see the whole picture.
Thank you. Mr. Garcetti?
Thank you very much, Madam President. And thank you, Mr. Parks, for leading the way on this issue and making sure that we continue to quote Mr. Labange, information is knowledge is power. I get that right, in the right order? And I understand the UCR requirements, but at the same time, we need to have the data here that will help us track the way we've been tracking long-term where the city is at with domestic violence. One thing in the report, Paula, I was wondering if you had data on was what percentage of calls result in arrests citywide and whether we've had that over time, so we can see.
We do have it.
I know there's some by division. I'm sorry if I
It's
missed
by
it.
division. I mean, we'd have to just calculate
Do we
it.
haven't done the citywide one?
No.
Okay. It would be great
Yes.
if you all could
I will.
let us know that, because that really gives us.
Right.
I think we both want the breakdown of our divisions because we look at our own districts, but also citywide to get an
Okay.
idea where domestic violence has gone over time. That's really helpful as well. And you know, the centralized tracking recommendation I think is critical. We can go above and beyond, of course, what is required by national statistics, and I think that's the core of Mr. Parks' point. It's certainly a core of many of our points in my work as the council liaison to the Domestic Violence Task Force. I mean, that's something that I've heard as well. We would love to see the numbers go down and know they're going down for the right reasons.
Right.
But if they're going down for other reasons, it gets us confused. And if we change methodology along the way, that makes it the most difficult. I can understand that we might have to change the methodology for the Part 1 crimes. That's a separate issue from what we do ourselves. And in my conversations with the chief, I've underscored that and our need to continue to have that. That was my understanding in the first conversation I had with him. He later clarified, said, oh no, we have to do both. I'm fine as long as we are keeping track, though, overall, and not just calling these aggravated assaults. We know they're part of a continuum, of a spectrum, and an escalation of domestic violence, which costs us all in social as well as financial means so much. Secondly, you know, I think we've seen, obviously, nationally trends of domestic violence taking down because of the hard work of the domestic violence community, because it's been made socially less acceptable, because of the Violence Against Women Act, and because of much of the economic progress of the 1990s. I hope with the change in the economy, we won't see that tick up as well. But I do believe that we can move forward here also in making sure that we have an ability to respond to the smaller incidents as well. If we don't have that information, we won't be able to. But the work that we're doing right now with expanding our DART teams, there's a couple other models as well, but making sure we have the ability to actually get the social help to roll out early on in these domestic violence situations to help get a family, to help get children, to get a woman, to get somebody out of that situation early on. We talk so much in this horseshoe about hiring more police officers, and sometimes we forget it would be the equivalent of hiring 2,000 more police officers if we reduced our domestic violence calls in half, just by terms of hours back on the street taking care of other crimes, and that's why it's so critical. So I want to just thank you, Mr. Parks, and wholeheartedly support you on this and make sure we continue to track that and say that loud and clear to our police department that we have to have that at all levels, regardless of what the national requirements may be. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Garcetti. Our next speaker actually is me, but I'll go to the person after that, Mr. Weiss.
Thank you, Madam President. And colleagues, I think in the response that Ms. Culp gave to Ms. Hahn, that was the one that contained all the information, there was a lot of relevant information in there about what actually is going on in terms of what the LAPD has been doing over the last several years and why the shift in format in terms of reporting occurred. But I think, and it's good to have all of you at the table today. LAPD is not here today with us to present not only their side of the story, but what they're doing in the area of domestic violence. And so I know a lot of folks have pushed their buttons, but I think we need to have a full conversation on this. We need to ask a relevant person from the department come over, and I've asked that occur. And I'd suggest that if people have their say to the extent they want to today, but I had nothing but good things to say about the efforts of the LAPD in this area, and so I'd want to invite them to come and appear in front of us next Wednesday as well. So my motion is that at the conclusion of people's discussion day, that we continue the item till next Wednesday to give LAPD and the Domestic Violence Task Force an opportunity to
Let me just ask a question to council members. Do you want to continue this right now and then make sure that the appropriate representative of the police department join with the Commission on the Status of Women in the CLA, or would you want to talk? Mr. Parks?
Get it on the table, because if they show, they may have some questions that we have that are relevant that they can answer, and the issues that are most important to each council member.
There was no second then to the motion to continue, so if someone could still come over, do you know if someone's going to come over, Mr. Weiss, you want to check? Second it to continue it a week, so this is going to be for discussion. Thank you. Ms. Gruhl, please.
Thank you, Mr. Labange. It's been a good discussion. There's nothing worse than when you hear about a domestic violence incident. It hits your heartstrings, and particularly when there's children involved, and how important it is for us to be sensitive to the issues that come about. And I think a lot of training has gone on in the past for LAPD officers. What we want to make sure is that we are always at the forefront, and that we're continuing to do things better and be the leader for the country. And I think that's where Ms. Petrata and the Commission is going, is the interest in where are there needs for improvement, where can we do things differently, where have things not worked. I do have a question, and this may be an LAPD question, but Brent, you may be able to answer this. The aggravated assault. So what you're suggesting is that if I'm the victim of domestic violence and someone has hit me, broke my arm, whatever it may be, bruised something in which physical, there's a presence of some physical activity that has occurred. Is that considered an aggravated assault, and is that considered a Part 1 crime? And
Yes.
hold my time.
Yes.
Yes. So what does not fit in that category in the report that you have? So if there's a verbal challenge, and they're, and they call LAPD because he's threatened, usually he threatened his wife or partner, whatever it may be, that's not considered a Part 1 crime.
That's right.
Okay. So the only difference, so will there still be reports in the Part 1 crime of domestic violence?
Yes, both on Return A, there is a box to be checked for other assaults, other than the 4 categories of aggravated assaults, even though those are not reported.
Hold my time.
And in addition to that, on CompStat, there's a separate reporting for both Part 1 and Part 2 child and spousal abuse. I think we tend to rely on this more internally than we do on the UCR Return A's, but they're both available.
Because I think, I understand the national kind of component of that, but if you're in a local government, you don't necessarily want to go to 2 different categories, because domestic violence is domestic violence. And to be able to have LAPD know that, have the public understand that, and so I'm interested, as Mr. Weiss said, to have LAPD be present to respond. Have they at all responded to your report, Paula?
They were part of the working group to put the report together. There, again, trying to find data was very difficult, which points to the fact that we need a better tracking system. But yes, they're very aware of this report, even in its draft form.
In its draft form. Have they haven't done a written kind of report?
No,
like
they
agree
have
with this
not done
part or
a
don't?
written report. Again, this is sort of making its way through various processes, Public Safety and Council. And of course, what we're going to hope to do through what CLA is doing is all sit at the table and have something much more comprehensive than what we have now.
Okay. Then, I mean, I support that, because I think I'm interested in having come back when everyone has had a chance to comment and give their recommendations, and including the CLA. So I look forward to that, and when it's continued to next week. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gruhl. Mr. Reyes.
Thank you, Council President. I do want to first thank you for this executive summary. I think it provides a rather dramatic picture of what we are doing and how we are proceeding with addressing this issue. The question I have has to do with how we treat the victims of domestic violence during the investigative process, and what options we give the victims in terms of how they're kept safe. I've had experiences in the past in the Rampart where you have a victim and she has nowhere else to go. They're taken to the station, but they're in the same facility as maybe the suspect, maybe in the same room or in the same hallway. Same thing for rape victims, where there's nowhere to take them and they're put in the police car and taken away. Procedurally, looking at the parameters of your study, did you consider the physical element, the experience of the victim when they are suffering from an attack? Please hold my time.
No, council member. Again, what we were looking at is sheer numbers, but you do make a very salient point, what happens at the station for the victim. And I do think it is something that we should absolutely look at if we're looking at how we, not only how many calls we receive, how it's adjudicated, but in fact, we do forget the victim is part of this whole scenario, and how is that person treated. We looked at numbers. We absolutely did not go there, but I think it's an important component.
Again, the key pivotal point for me is the treatment of the human being. And right now we are designing new stations. Right now we have an opportunity, at least in Rampart, of a brand new station that's being designed. Now I've been asking the question, and I've been told, don't worry, Councilman, it's being taken care of. But I want to make sure that as a result of this product, that we're able to ask the right people the questions in the police department. Are we addressing the experience of the victim? Are they put in a safe place? Are they put in a place where they can at least absorb the trauma in the most positive fashion, if you will, in a healing fashion, as opposed to being put in the same hallway or room as their attackers? And somewhere, and I believe in your first page executive summary, you go through the police department's role and you number it 1, 2, 3, 4. Perhaps in our next step, because this is a receive and file, correct? We're going to continue this, we're going to have this discussion. Perhaps when you come back, if we can have a response from the police department, how are we responding to that environment when the person is being victimized? What happens to them those minutes afterwards, that half hour, that 1 hour, that 2 hour period after the incident? I mean, where do they go? What if they can't go back home? What if the person's waiting for them? Right. These, I think, are pivotal points that speak to how we address the needs of the victims.
Well, and I think, Councilmember Garcetti has been really the lead on the DART teams, which not all the city has, my understanding. And of course, the DART team is a domestic abuse response team, and they would be called out on a domestic violence scene, and they are advocates, and they can provide referral services, they can provide shelter and the like. Again, how they're being used, to the extent that they're being used, how many times they're being used, I don't know, because I don't think that information is aggregated anywhere. But again, you know, if we're looking at the picture, we do need to know how their services are being used.
So a formal request from myself to you as a commission and to the police representatives when they come back is to give us a perspective, give us a scenario as to what happens. And then the second piece is I want to guarantee that the new police department station sites are being designed with that function in mind, that we have a safe place for the victims, where they don't have to be sharing the same space where their attackers are, just out of basic common sense. So I'd like to see those 2 points. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. Mr. Rosendahl.
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree with Mr. Weiss. We need to continue this item so that we can get the LAPD's input and get a better understanding. But if I can just, for everybody trying to hear this, when did we change the definition of domestic violence from being a felony crime that was listed in the reports to not being listed? When did we do that?
For purposes of the UCR guidelines and the federal Return A reporting, as far as I know, those definitions haven't changed. What's changed is LAPD's policy about whether it adheres to those definitions.
When did they do that?
Mid last year. We're still tracking down the exact date.
And what did that do? It caused our numbers, overall numbers, to look like crime went down when in fact it's a debatable issue about domestic violence, or am I wrong on that?
That's right, and part of what we've been asked to do, and we have asked LAPD to quantify the exact number of incidents that would have been reported as Part 1 violent crimes under the way we had reported these crimes prior to the change versus after the change. So certainly there is the appearance of a decrease of violent crime in Los Angeles simply because we are no longer reporting so-called non-violent domestic violence crimes
What do you mean
Part
by
1.
so-called non-domestic violence crime? What do you mean by that?
I think everybody has their own definition. There's a penal code definition, there are UCR code definitions, there are common sense definitions about what constitutes domestic violence. For the purpose of UCR reporting, we're talking about whether an assault is a simple assault or an aggravated assault. And again, under the penal code in California, even a simple assault in a domestic violence context can be prosecuted as a felony.
Commission, tell me your attitude on all this.
Well, you know, it's interesting you say that. One of the recommendations that we were looking at, again, the data, I want to just say the data we have is dated in the sense it's 2001, 2003. And I know LAPD is making a lot of improvements from that time. But something that you said, Councilmember, really does strike a note, because the language is important on how it's responded to, how people see it. And when we make recommendations, hopefully at the end of the day, that we think about training and using appropriate language. And I absolutely agree that it's critical, because language, depending how it's said, can ratchet it up, a domestic violence call, you know, to the seriousness that it deserves. So again, I think it's important. These are my feelings, and I certainly agree with what you're saying, that the language and how it's used, both by the police department, the PSR person, and the public, should be consistent so that we know what we're dealing with.
And at the moment, you don't think it is?
No, absolutely. I don't think it is, based on what we're finding. And again, when we go back, and hopefully we'll have some salient recommendations, that we do look at consistent language.
Did you want to comment?
No, I was just going to echo what Paula stated, that the language is very important at the onset of the victim calling 911. And not only that, it equips the officer who is going out to the scene so he can be prepared for something that may have escalated, that might be deadly force.
Yeah, I mean, I want to continue it because I need to hear the LAPD talk about what their definition is, how it changed, how the numbers changed, and what does that really mean with domestic violence? Because obviously, one domestic violence offense to me is as bad as it gets, and anybody that does domestic violence should be, prosecuted to the full extent of the law, and those statistics should be clean and clear and concise for all of us. So obviously, I don't have an attitude yet because I need to hear LAPD's logic for what they did, and did it change or not change? I don't know if domestic violence has gone down. I'm not buying any of these arguments that it's gone down. I'm just wanting to know what the facts are and the truth is.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl. We're going to continue this matter a week. I
and
appreciate
I
that.
certainly want us to continue it.
Yes, thank you. And before the next speaker, I'd like to welcome the Gandy family from Philadelphia. Please, if you would stand. Their daughter-in-law is a city employee, Patricia Austin. But the Gandhi family, please stand and be recognized by the City Council from the great city of Philadelphia. Welcome to Los Angeles. Now I'd like to call on Mr. Zine, please.
Philadelphia, you've got a great sandwich there. I forgot what it's called. A hoagie, it's incredible. It's like a meal for a whole family of four. Cheesesteak. No, there's something else they have there too. Anyway, it reminds me of Philadelphia, a great place. Welcome to Los Angeles. Getting back to the serious matter. The response to the call. Uniformed officers respond. And if I can get my time held on some of these questions, please. Code 2, Code 3, how do they respond on a domestic violence call?
I don't know,
Okay.
Councilmember.
Have you or any of the people in your department ever gone out with them on the calls for domestic violence?
I went many years ago, and when I was in the mayor's office.
Okay, so the contemporary standard that we have now, the police department has to answer how they respond to Code 2 or Code 3 as a high priority call, or just get there as quickly as you can. The issue of the prosecution, prosecute the individual to the fullest extent of the law. Do we have the statistics on how many of the reports that are submitted by the uniformed officers to the detectives that are submitted to the district attorney that are rejected to the city attorney and then rejected down to mediation or arbitration? Do we have those reports?
Yes.
What does that show?
Well, part of the, we only have the city attorney. We don't have the district attorneys, of
Because
course.
domestic violence being a felony, we go to a district attorney for
Right.
prosecution. Now, if
Right.
they're not doing the prosecution,
Right.
it's getting kicked down to a misdemeanor.
And that's a really good point, because the problem we had in even developing this draft report is that their information is not compatible with ours,
Who's there?
the district attorney's information
Because all felonies would,
would go to the district attorney's office.
and if they, by policy, are deciding not to prosecute, it automatically falls back
Right.
on the city attorney. So we have to have that come back to us
Right.
also.
Right, so I guess the point, and what you're asking here is the dilemma we had in trying to really get a true picture,
Okay, now time held, please. Push
Of-
that button, Mr. Labange.
of calls and adjudication, because it's a huge component that's missing. And we had them at the table. We have the district attorney's representative at the table with data, but we could not compare it. The way they aggregate it is very different than the way we do.
But if we have 5,000 domestic violence reports, crime reports, arrests, et cetera, we can track that through the system. And I know the district attorney has a filing policy. His
Right.
filing policy may not be in accord with the department's prosecution of individuals,
Right.
which then we go to the city attorney and find out how many the city attorney is filing or how many are actually rejected. So, I mean, that issue is basically what happens to the case. Does it get prosecuted as a felony, a misdemeanor, mediation, arbitration, or just totally rejected? With 5,000 cases and fewer actually prosecuted, and I don't know the numbers, but I think that to have a full picture, as this is going to come back, you need to have that information. And maybe we need a representative from the district attorney's office here, a representative from the city attorney's office here, and what is their policy when those reports are presented to them for the prosecution. The other issue I have is visible injury versus no visible injury on a domestic violence case. Is the policy, if there's a visible injury, a felony versus no visible injury, not a felony? That may be one of the criteria that they're using when they respond to domestic violence call. We need to get that answer. And on repeat incidents, is there any tracking of how many recidivism on this particular category of crime? Do we have that?
No.
Okay, see, all these components
Right.
really make up the bulk, because if the district attorney says, you've got 3 incidents, we're not going to file the felony, we've got to wait till the 4th incident, I mean, that's going to really show if the other elements of the criminal justice system are doing what they're supposed to do, because you can send all the uniformed officers out all day and put everyone in jail, and if it doesn't get prosecuted and it keeps on going around the merry-go-round, then the people who are committing domestic violence think the system's a joke, and they keep getting away with it. And that's one of the tragedies that we have to deal with, is to get the other elements of the criminal justice system. And then those that are convicted, what is the court doing? Are they putting them on probation? Are they releasing them? Are they actually taking some aggressive action so their behavior will change, so they won't be a bad individual?
And that's exactly right, because the district attorney part of it is critical, because what we've heard anecdotally, both from the district attorney's office and other advocates, is that perpetrators are opting for jail time because they know they're not going to serve it.
So, I mean, maybe the sheriff's department has to come and say, if you get prosecuted and convicted of domestic violence and you get 2 years, what are you going to sentence? 10 days in jail? All those components have to be answered to have the full picture of this. Just to say that the uniformed officers, because we don't have enough because they're being diverted to other activities, aren't responding to those calls in a timely manner, and the whole system bogs down. But there's so many components that we don't have answers to. We really need to get those answers to show a full picture if, in fact, it's working as it's supposed to work. And I used to serve as a board director of Haven Hills Battered Women's Shelter, so I understand the consequences when the system doesn't do what it's supposed to do to protect the victims. And there's been too many victims over the history of time. And those little bumper stickers on the city cars, domestic violence is a crime. If we don't enforce that and diligent with that, then we're just spinning our wheels and absolutely accomplishing nothing.
Mr. Zine. Thank you very much.
I'm now completed, Mr. LeBlanc. Thank you for your
Very good,
patience and your indulgence.
Thank you. Mr. Parks.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, one thing, Brent, you made a comment earlier about the type of crime that we in the state of California have what appears to be very minor assaults that can be prosecuted as felonies. That, colleagues, is exactly why the city of LA in '84, when I was sitting at that table as a member of the police department, that directed the city of LA to put these crimes as part 1. Because we have a unique set of crimes in the state of California that no one else has. And our reporting should reflect the state of California, the city of LA, not guessing what happens in Miami or New York. And because we have unique kinds of crimes, they have to be reported uniquely. The other thing I think has been misinformation from the department is that when we use terms that we can't report a certain way, I think it loses the fact that the federal UCR crimes are voluntary reporting. Have you found that out in your research?
We're still confirming that with the federal and state representatives. The text of the guidelines state that while filing under these guidelines is voluntary, if a jurisdiction chooses to file, then it must follow the guidelines, and furthermore, that the adherence to the guidelines is audited.
Okay, but the issue is that they're voluntary. So if we didn't comply and didn't report them, that is strictly our decision to do. So the other side of it is that being that it's voluntary, the cities, at least through my experience, took the tack that the report should reflect the city's unique crime picture. Because we don't know what's going on in other cities, and we know that there are different crimes in other cities. All you have to do is look at TV, and in New York, they're arresting people for burglary 2 and burglary 3. We don't have that in the state of California. And so I think these are the issues that have specifically been driven by this council from the Lula Mae Thomas, then later the other issues in the state that we mandated reporting, mandatory reporting. Many states do not have that. We also have mandatory arrest in this state for domestic violence. Many states do not have that. And so our report reflects what we do, and we've chosen not to go to states and use them as a comparison when they do not have the comprehensive state legislation that we have. And that's why it's different. And so, and one other issue I wanted to clarify, I think this item was on the agenda. It was the police department that decided not to be here. It wasn't that they weren't invited. And so I certainly would hope that when we continue it next week, that we do get them here, because having been in police work for 38 years, what we commonly call, when we look at the report from the police department, they made 3 major changes in reporting. One was domestic violence. One, they chose no longer to report individual crimes at the same scene. They now call it incident-based. and then they decided on car thefts that come from leasing agencies to call those embezzlements. What we call that, when I was in the police department, when we saw other cities do that, we call that cooking the books, because there's no other reason to make those changes other than to come up with a better looking report, because in reality the crimes are all still there, and the public has told us routinely they're no safer than when the prior report was out. And to come up with all of these mechanical systems that separate the crime and not give a clear picture, because it was only done for one reason, to compare Part 1 crime with the rest of the world. And it dropped tens of thousands of reports out of the system into Category 2s, so we no longer have to report them. And the two things of greatest concern to me, having worked on domestic violence for 25 years, was that it was done without public notice, it was done without public conversation, and then to come back and say, well, we put an asterisk on our report. No one reads the UCR report. They only read the headlines that say crime is down. Then the crime reduction was touted by the police department as major good police work caused crime to go down. It wasn't until Jill Leovy in the Times wrote an article and said, misleading crime stats brought our attention to this issue. And so I think when we look at this issue, the City of LA, through this council, for at least the almost 40 years that I'm aware of, sent a clear message that UCR reporting should be based on our local nuances and state-related crimes that reflects our crime picture and not guessing as to somebody else's crime picture. And because it was voluntary, that we then had the ability to report as we saw fit, because we wanted to make sure what we reported was accurate crime stats. We can't judge and we can't report what Miami does or Cleveland or whatever. We can only be concerned about what happens in the city. So to go out and tell the public, particularly in the area I represent, that has the highest violence, highest homicide rate, a high rate of domestic violence that end in homicide, that be assured crime is down, and keep reporting that, and they're looking at me in a meeting saying, you obviously don't live in our community because crime hasn't gone down. To later find out it's just in a different category, and then to say—
Mr. Parks, just as you go, we're past time on that one.
Oh.
I wanted to wrap up.
Push my button again?
I know.
You gonna make me push my button again?
Yeah, push your button again.
to cause us to then go back to the public and say, you got to figure out our system because we're putting it in 3 different places, makes even less sense. Because when they're reporting on Part 1, they will not report it with all these different categories. They're only going to use Part 1, and we're going to tell the public they're safe when they're not safe.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. Thank you for that. Mr. Weiss, you're going to call the police department and get the appropriate representative here next week, and we're going to continue this 1 week from today. Thank you very much. Next item, Madam Clerk.
Next item, Mr. President, is item number 71, and that was called special by Councilmember Perry.
Councilmember Perry.
Okay, thank you. Receive and file.
Move to receive and file.
Bring it up again next week.
Tommy, I want to speak on it.
Mr. Rosendahl? Mr. Rosendahl, we have a motion to receive and file. You want to speak to this?
I want to speak to this issue.
Please.
Thank you. Colleagues, what we're seeing here with the Ted Lieu piece of legislation is to expand the AQMD board, right? Go ahead. No.
Okay, whatever you want to do, just do it, just do it. Just
Okay.
be yourself. Don't hold back.
I passed around to all of you the way our board is picked in Southern California and how the Northern California board is picked. If you notice, the Northern California board has 22 members. It's by population, by county. This is what we need to do in Southern California as well. I spoke to Assemblyman Ted Lieu. His motion right now, which goes through the process, is a step in the right direction. It is not the solution. Please understand, colleagues, that we need to expand this AQMD board to represent the population in the 6 counties in Southern California. We are 18 million people here. We should be part of this process in a more robust way. If you will look at the list of the 12, other than I know Jan Perry, and I'm delighted she's on it, she represents the 4 million of us in the city, I question the process in the past of creating that board and some of the membership on that board, one appointed by the Speaker of the Assembly. Why should the Speaker of the Assembly pick somebody when the 6 counties in Southern California have leadership here that should be part of the process? This AQMD board is critical to all of us, and therefore inclusion and representation of the counties is the way the democracy should work. So as Mr. Liu agrees with me that this one step today just gives the South Bay some opportunity to be part of the process, next year he will put in another piece of legislation that will open up the whole thing to all 6 counties so we can be robustly represented in the quality of our air for all of us. The present system for Southern California is archaic and its day is done. It's a new day, and we need to freshen up that board with over 20 members. If they have 22 in the north, we should have at least 20 here. I'm actually thinking we should have closer to 25 to 28 members on it. And Janice Hahn and I and others strongly believe in this, so thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl. Appreciate your words. So, Madam Clerk, what's before us?
The motion to receive and file.
All right, open the roll. Tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
All right, so ordered. Next item.
Mr. President, do you wish to clear the desk before going into closed session?
Yes.
Council has motions for posting and referral.
Approved.
That clears the desk for closed session.
Okay, members of the public, we're now going to go in closed session, so we thank you for coming to the council meeting today. We will go in closed session, and after closed session, then we will open back up.
On what? On what?
Okay, we're back on. Now it's a public comment period for a gentleman who wasn't able to get into the overcrowding in the chambers earlier in the meeting. We call on Bill Dreyer, please, for your public comment.
Yes,
Thank
I'm
you.
Bill Dyer. I'm with the In Defense of Animals. I live in Venice. Thank you for letting me speak. I'll be very brief, but I believe I have devastating information regarding Gita, the elephant at the Los Angeles Zoo. We have been told in the past that she was first seen by zoo personnel at 5 a.m. on Saturday, June 10th. It comes out now that she was seen by zoo personnel the previous evening at 8:45 p.m. in a down position. This means that she was left unattended for more than 10 hours. We have been told over and over again that the sooner you can get to an elephant that's down and get her up, the better chance she has of surviving. And she might have lived had the zoo been there to see her. It was reported to them and no action was taken. This was at, again, 8:45 p.m. on Friday. We have filed a complaint with the USDA for a federal investigation into the matters concerning Gita, and I have given you a copy. You have a folder, and it has the copy of our complaint in it. I really hope that you can look into this before it gets to be a cover-up. This is developing right now into a scandal. We talked about it yesterday at the Zoo Commission meeting, and some of the commissioners there are very, very concerned about it. All we're seeking here is the truth. We have to get to the truth and not a cover-up. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Dyer. Thank you for your public comment. That completes the public comment period today. No more public comment cards, Madam Clerk?
No, Mr. President.
Okay, if we could ask the Sergeant at Arms to prepare the chambers for the executive session on matters taken up by the council. Thank you.